The heartbreaking, inevitable day. The day they came for Ingrid. This is months after Mary's death, after a brutal winter, after Ingrid's mind had slowly torn away from the world Eric and the children still lived in. It's the late spring of 1878. The river ice has melted. The hills are green again. But inside the Halverson cabin, the world is falling apart. It all started with a knock at the cabin door just after dawn. 3 sharp raps. Not the wind, not the creak of the pines. A human knock. Eric was already awake, sitting at the rough kitchen table with his head in his hands, the Bible closed beside him. He hadn't slept all night. He hadn't truly slept in weeks, not since the last episode, when Ingrid had wandered half naked into the woods, whispering that she was following Mary's voice through the trees. Elise and Henrik stirred in the bed across the room, the straw rustling. Eric rose, heavier, slower than he used to be. His back ached from worry. His chest felt like it was wrapped in iron bands. He opened the door. 2 men stood outside, both from the town 40 miles south. One wore a dark coat and carried a folded piece of paper, official looking. The other, who was much broader, carried a rope coiled loosely in one hand, not threatening, but ready. Behind them stood a wagon, empty except for a wool blanket and a jug of water. Eric nodded. He didn't speak. The men didn't either. The weight of the thing didn't need words. Ingrid was sitting in front of the fire, even though it was already spring warm. Her hair was wild and loose around her shoulders. Her hands were stained with soot from the hearth, though she hadn't been cooking. She was rocking slightly, whispering something to a shape only she could see. She didn't even look up when the door opened. She didn't even notice the men. She was too busy murmuring, "Shh, little one, shh. You'll wake the birds." But there was nothing in her arms. But in her mind, she was cradling Mary. Eric stood there for a moment, gripping the door frame so hard the wood creaked. He thought of every day they had lived together. Norway, Minnesota, the long journey west. He thought of their wedding day at the small church with frost on the windows. He thought of the way she had laughed once, a long time ago, tossing her hair back by the river, free and bright. He thought to himself, this isn't her fault, and this isn't my fault, but none of that matters now. He swallowed, and it felt like swallowing stones. He stepped aside, and the men entered. They moved carefully, like hunters approaching a wounded animal. Slow, and with gentle hands. "Ingrid," Eric said, crouching near her. His voice was soft and trembling. "My love, we have to go for a ride." Her eyes flickered to him then, briefly clear. She smiled, soft and crooked, and said, "Will the baby like the ride?" Eric choked on his breath, but he nodded. Yes, she'll like it. That was the last thing he said to her as his wife. One of the men gently took her elbow, and she rose without a fight, still smiling that vacant smile. still cradling nothing in her arms. They led her to the wagon, and she did not resist. The bigger man tied a loose rope around her waist and the wagon rail, just in case, but she didn't seem to notice. Eric followed, sad and hollow. The children, wide-eyed and silent, peeked through the cabin door but didn't move. When Ingrid was settled on the wagon bench, she began humming, a lullaby in Norwegian, one Eric hadn't heard since Elise was a baby. Then the wagon creaked and the wheels turned. Dust rose behind them as they headed down the narrow track toward the town, towards the institution, a state-run sanitarium, half a day's ride away. Eric stood there long after the wagon disappeared over the hill. He stood there until the sun was fully risen, until the birds stopped singing for the heat of midday. He couldn't breathe. The cabin behind him felt heavier than a mountain. Elise came to him and took his hand. He didn't feel it at first. When he finally did, he knelt in the dirt and pulled both children into his arms and wept. Silent, violent, desperate sobs that tore out of him in a way work and prayer and silence never had. Because now, for the first time since they crossed the wide ocean, he was alone, alive, but alone.